a lag between when you get tested and when you get the results. In comparison to Europe, I mean, all my friends in Europe, they can get their results the same day. But in America, it's taking, you know, a week or longer. All my friends in Europe, they can get their results.
Sorry.
So, yeah. So,
We're live on my YouTube channel, finally. Hello, YouTubers. Sorry.
So yeah, he's sort of in a bind in getting back to Paris. And then with me, I don't know. I had a show actually at the end of August in France, about a 2.5 hour drive from Barcelona. So I was going to go there mid-August and kind of stay till mid-November, but now that's been canceled because of the rise in cases.
Yeah.
So I'll probably go out like early September and see if I can get in with my resident.
Was there a certain time limit of the restrictions from the US going into Europe? I didn't really look into that. Or is it just like whenever until they stay?
I mean, it's great. There's a map that my brother sent me today of all the places around. It's like a world map where the US isn't allowed entry. People from the US, and it's crazy. It's like one tiny little territory that they're able to go. We are able to go. So I don't know. I mean, the situation is quite dynamic. It's changing every day. Obviously, the lack of American tourism everywhere has affected the economies further this summer. So nobody wants that. But, you know, the difference between Europeans and Americans is like all their decision making is led by science, whereas like in America, everything is like politicized. And they're not paying attention or following the science. So I think the Europeans, what they're doing with the ban on Americans and stuff, I think it's probably smart.
Yeah, but I think the problem is I think we're too late as well, and especially what happened in the UK being very late, and now we're seeing, you know, there's all these warnings about traveling. And so I don't see it. I see it being the same here as it has been in places like California, Florida, where the cases are going to just pick up, and we will move into a lockdown. People are lazy as well in Europe. People aren't sort of, I don't know. It's like they don't. It's not like maybe they don't care, but they're negligent.
You get the memo.
Yeah. And it's just. I mean, if you go into Kreuzberg, I mean, tonight we walked through Kreuzberg. It's packed, you know, it's rammed. It's people, and there is definitely a lack of tourists. There's no techno tourists but you definitely, you know, everyone's out. It's summer, and yeah, so I'm sure we're heading in the same direction.
Yeah,
but I thought I saw something earlier saying the cases in Germany are rising up again.
Yeah, they are. They're rising everywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Barcelona, like they went from I think 20 cases a day to like 1,000 or 2,000 now. So they will probably go back to phase 1.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get in before. Well, we have Dean Musa. He's standing by, so we should probably not keep him too much longer. Dean is, I think, had random communication with him from a very long time ago, but I think a lot of people are probably wondering, why did we pick Dean Mewson to be on the show? And I think by the end of the show, he will have answered that question. And we talked amongst ourselves about, you know, how important it is to have different perspectives from every aspect of our industry. Dean, Matt, do you want to, since you brought.
Yeah, I mean, I invited Dean. I mean, basically because I think, you know, we haven't had a manager on the show yet. Dean was also, you know, he cut his teeth as a DJ, as a producer. He's done a remix on records as Bear Weasel. You know, he's a jack of all trades. He's done many things, and he's now running, or he's the owner of Dispersion, or part owner, which is a PR company in the UK, in London. And they service labels such as Records and a lot of other great labels. And he also runs Bear Management and looks after my good friend Spencer Parker, Ben Sims, amongst others. So yeah, and he's also, I think he's of course living in London, living in UK, and I'm sure he's going to be able to inform us what's going on over there. So
Perfect. So let's
bring him on.
There he is.
How's it going, boy?
Hello.
How are you, Dean?
Nice to meet you and see you.
Yeah, likewise. No, things are interesting over here. And I was just listening to you guys talking about kind of the COVID situation and how we might be on a bit of a.
Before we get to COVID, though, what are you drinking? Because that's the most important.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Well, I have a selection. The last thing I want to do is perpetuate the myth that all managers or PR people are drunks. But I am actually going to do that. I'm starting off with a Rodenbach Grand Cru, which is a Belgian red ale, which is it's delicious. It's really, really good. It's surprisingly light, and it's got a sour note right up my street.
Tasty.
And
That's like the same. Looks like the same glass that I made with my little Truncate logo.
Oh look, he's getting his marketing in immediately. You're gonna have your buy links flashing up.
But they're sold out, so it's all good.
Oh, okay. There we go. You're gonna do another run though, aren't you?
I'm gonna make some different design and different glass. The next one.
It's a nice glass though.
I'll wait for the new design then.
The new design will be like a regular pint, not a regular pint glass, but similar size, not like a wine glass stemless.
So are you saying, Ali, that David didn't send you one?
No, I have one for him.
I think I asked him to. I forgot all about it. I asked him to set one aside for me because he was selling out very quickly.
It's still there. I still have it, dude. So don't worry.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll talk offline.
Yeah.
So, Dean, for those of the people watching that don't know who you are and your background, maybe you can bring us up to speed. You're from Newcastle.
Yes, I'm from Newcastle in the north of England.
Home of Shindig, which
home of
a lot
Shindig.
of fun memories for me.
Yeah, a legendary club. In fact, actually, I was thinking about it because actually I was pretty sure you and Sharam played. Shindig was maybe your second UK gig after you guys got your visas sorted out.
Yeah.
And I still remember that very, very well.
We connected really well with Scott, Scooby, Mark, the whole gang there. And it became, it really felt like we were coming home. They allowed us to play open to close.
Yeah.
We always hung out till sunrise in the back room afterwards and caught up with the whole gang there. And they were a real family. And I have fond memories of that period.
Yeah, I love that club. So I kind of, I grew up in Newcastle, and then I ended up kind of moving to go to university in Yorkshire, like near Leeds, and kind of continued my clubbing education at Back to Basics there. But I did my degree in marketing and PR. And during that time, I was also kind of DJing a bit and I was writing quite a lot. So I started writing when I was like 15. I managed to blag a column in DMA magazine in the States, which it came about because of like a weird early music forum on CompuServe. So I ended up hooking up with someone there. So I got introduced to the edit. Anyway, so I was doing a lot of writing, and, I did my degree in marketing, and I kind of never wanted to work in music because I always kind of viewed it as being something massively unstable and I was kind of aiming for a graduate scheme and thought, it'll always be a hobby. But actually I got offered a job while I was in my halfway through my degree. So I started doing kind of promotions for a small record label, and then they offered me a job. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll do it for a year or two, and then I'll, go and try and earn some real money. And then here I am. And in between then and there, I've the marketing and kind of PR side of the music industry, the underground end of the music industry has been something that I've always been really passionate about. But I've done my bit of DJing and producing and artist management and a lot of label management over the years. And I'm kind of in a situation now where I'm a director of Dispersion, which is a PR company, and we kind of look after everything from simple DJ promo to full service like radio and press.
And you guys, Dispersion started before there were a lot of other competitors?
Yeah, so there was a kind of weird stage in my career. So when I first moved to London, my current business partner had a record label called King Size, and he kind of managed Meet Katie and Chicken Lips and kind of a lot of those guys. And it was quite an eclectic label. But as I came down to work for him in London, which is probably about 15, 16 years ago, like I think most people here will remember that we started to have that point where the vinyl thing just died. So there was quite a lot of distribution companies that went under. And around that time, a lot of the old style PR companies also disappeared. So there was like these great PR companies like the Darling Department and stuff, and they started to close their doors. And myself and Julian, we were like, okay, well, you know, I said to Julian, I was like, I'd love to be fully focused working on PR and promotions again. And the one thing that was missing was, so back then, if you had an album campaign, you would hire like a PR company in each major territory. So you paid $2,000 for Darling Department in the UK, and you spend $2,000 on a US company. You spend a couple of grand on Asia. You spend a couple of grand on GAS. Can you remember when you had those budgets for an underground album? It's like, wow. So we knew that obviously a lot of labels were struggling with the vinyl kind of dropping out, and digital was yet to take hold. And a lot of stuff was starting to shift online. So we kind of set up with the idea that we wanted to be able to be a company that someone who was going to promote a single could come and afford to get a package that would be DJ promo, press, radio, online, and we would operate worldwide, because the magazines had kind of started to shift online, and obviously email was incredibly prevalent then. We're talking about the mid 2000s. So yeah, I think we were one of the first that was, you could come to and you could reach all four corners of the globe without having to spend a lot of money in individual territories. And then also, by the very virtue of that, we had a friend who was actually an old producer, a guy called Force Mass Motion, Mike Wells. And he was like, oh, why are you guys trying to find weird ways of sending files to people? So he built us a bespoke system, and this was long before Fat Drop. And I think we may have been the first with a digital delivery system.
I think so too. Yeah, because maybe you reached out to me to get on board in those early days, and I thought it was revolutionary.
Yeah, it was, and it was kind of nice. And we found it tough for a couple of years because I think, all of the kind of money was sucked out of the music industry. But, we're here 16 years later, and things have been going pretty well generally through most of it. We managed to weather most storms. And
having dabbled in different aspects of our industry, what drew you to PR? And later management.
It's kind of strange because I've done a lot of the stuff in my career concurrently. So I've rarely done one thing like on its own. So even when I was doing promotions for King Size, I was involved in managing Chicken Lips when they were doing really well. And
Chicken Lips, incidentally, is one of the guys from Bizarre Inc., right? Or both?
No, two of the guys from Bizarre Inc.
Bizarre Inc. were 3 or 2?
So 3, I think. So it was like Playing with Knives, and then Andy and Dean decided to do Chicken Lips.
Massive fan of Bizarre Inc. If anybody is watching and wants to know more about Bizarre Inc., there's an incredible amount of really, really wicked material that they've made.
But yeah, like the stuff that's always made me interested in the kind of the business end in general has been that, I've always had this kind of impression that artists and the kind of DIY attitude is great, but kind of why should dance music be devoid of professionals in other areas? Like why should dance music why should a producer have to be able to do everything, including develop huge databases and look after social media and stuff? And like I've always been a big fan of DIY, so that's kind of slightly conflicting. But I also think the business side of electronic music, particularly since I started out, has changed so much. And I think about how much I read every day about streaming services, about promotion, about kind of changes in legal stuff with copyright. And I sit here and think, if I was an artist trying to grasp all of that stuff, I'd fucking explode. And you know, there's people like me who aren't very artistic, who kind of always kind of struggled to be kind of the artist that they want to be. And a lot of people will say, oh, you know, a lot of the business side of the music industry is frustrated DJs. But, you know, for me, it was like from the very beginning, I was like, okay, well, I have these skills. You know, I went and did a marketing degree. I knew what I was talking about. And I was kind of, I'd opened up Music Week magazine in the UK, which is an industry trade magazine. And I'd look at all these people being appointed to major labels. And I'd be like, well, why is that not happening in electronic music, which has a worldwide audience? It's growing every day. And artists are way more isolated. They don't have these huge teams. So, and then suddenly you start scratching the surface and you find all of this cool stuff that you can do to help music that you give a shit about get heard. And that's cool. And that's a career. And that's something that you can kind of go, okay, like I really want to do that and want to learn more about it.
So it sounds like the music industry has been as unstable as you initially thought.
Yeah, but I still kind of wouldn't change my decisions. I think there was a period from when I made that decision to when I was about 31 years old, where I would talk to my friends who did graduate schemes and who were working for like big international brands and stuff. And I always felt like the kind of underdog and the guy who was kind of suffering because he wanted to do. And then from about 30, 32, 33 onwards, I was like, thank fuck I'm not those guys. Because, you know, I still get there to listen to everything that I want to listen to and do what I want to do. And I have an okay living and, you know, I have a nice business and a nice life. So.
Did you start doing the PR stuff before the artist management, or was it all together, or did it come later?
I started off in PR earliest. So like not even proper PR really. I was like the promo guy. So I was there kind of developing the DJ mailing lists, and it was really glamorous actually. So I was working in a tiny office in Sheffield, which was like about 3 meters by 3 meters with 3 people. And, you know, that was the days when like 300 white labels would turn up and I'd have to print out the labels and stick them all on and then put them in the vinyl mailers. And then it'd be like, right, okay, well, you've got to carry those to the post office. I mean, I tell people about this, you know, when you get these boring stories that you repeat, but I remember once our franking machine in the office broke and it was a Friday night and I had lots of triple packed records to take to the post office. And the only solution was to buy stamps. And there was about 180 in this mail out. And I threw up from licking stamps. that was like the early part of my career, was throwing up through licking stamps. Yeah, no, exactly. So no, I was kind of like a promo guy. So I started off doing the DJ promo thing, and then yeah, like as I kind of wore on, I started dealing more with the kind of the real press, radio end of stuff.
And like, what made you want to start doing like artist management? How did that come about?
Well, it was kind of a kind of weird series of accidents actually. So the label that I first started working with, they had a compilation that was mixed by these two guys from Washington DC, and they had like 5 tracks on the compilation that the record label had done. And anyway, the company that put out these compilations, Global Underground, they went under. And the advances were worth way more than my salary. So I got paid a redundancy fee. So I set up on my own a little bit. But at the same time, I was DJing, and I kind of made friends with a guy called Meet Katie, who was also managed by my current business partner. And he said to me, look, Julian, my partner now, was looking for like someone to help at the record label, because he was on his own and he was managing publishing, managing artists, running the label, doing all the promo himself. So I moved to London, started working with Julian, and one of the things that Julian was like, look, you know, I've got to manage Chicken Lips, but it's a lot of work, because they were doing a lot of major label remixes and stuff at the time. So he was like, do you want to do that with me? And I said yes. And then the next morning there was literally every task involved in artist management on my plate. So that was that. And the thing that's always been nice about artist management when you get sick of anything else is that artist management is constantly different. Like there's not one element in your
I was
day.
going to ask you, I mean, I have a ton of questions on this that we'll get to. But what is the role of a manager today? And has it evolved over time?
I think
as everything evolves, you know?
Yeah, I think it's evolved purely from, at its fundamental, it stayed the same, because I kind of have a belief that an artist manager is there to work with an artist so that the artist can kind of have streams of income without having to be able to like take their eye off doing what they do. So, you know, you're there as their kind of business manager. But, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that kind of meant, you know, liaising with a lot of people and kind of, you know, it was a lot more communication based. Whereas now I think most artist managers have to be a lot more aware of digital marketing and, you know, have a lot deeper knowledge of kind of how the industry works. So, yeah, like most things in the music industry now we do a lot more, but earn less.
And like, is it better to grow with an art? Like, did you have a lot of experience? Obviously, when you, who was your first signing? Who was the first person that you started to manage?
Well, this is a weird one really, because I was happily doing PR for kind of like, I don't know, I think maybe like 7 or 8 years. And as a result of that, I had some kind of core artists that I kept working with. And I don't work with him anymore, but there was a guy called Huxley who suddenly kind of went from having a little bit of attention to a lot of attention. And we kind of knew each other as friends. Like, you know, we were both kind of hanging out a little bit. And, you know, I was still doing a little bit of DJing and playing kind of, you know, we had a lot of mutual friends anyway. And he started to do well. And one of the things about a PR is that for a lot of people, you become their kind of point of contact for a lot of stuff. You know, they'll come and ask you about most things. And that started happening with him. And then we also had a couple of unfortunate situations where he was kind of sending me emails from people that we kind of knew, we had mutual friends who were kind of like trying to guilt trip him into doing remixes or playing gigs and stuff. And I've always been quite like relatively strong-willed. So, you know, I was like, look, you know, if you want to run some of this stuff by me, then cool, we'll do that. And then yeah, I think within
you guys kind of just grew together, because it seems like it, and I don't know if this is true or not, but a lot of legendary like artist manager pairings seem to be when they grow together. You know, each grows into that role.
Yeah,
they start as mates or acquaintances, and then they both, over time, as the artist becomes more successful, the manager gains the confidence, the experience, and the power, and they grow together, and the foundations are really strong, quite strong. You know, like you two, Paul McGuinness, I think Diplo and his manager, Sonny Skrillex and his manager.
I think that is quite common, and I think it's kind of a good way of doing things. I mean, the one thing that I made sure that I did when you know, we formalized that agreement within a couple of months, and then I took another act on relatively quickly after it. And the first thing that I did was like, okay, I can't do this in PR. So I kind of decided to take a back step from doing PR. And then I realized, was like, okay, I kind of need to do this really seriously. So I joined an amazing professional body called the Music Managers Forum in the UK, and kind of went back to school a little bit and sort of went and taught myself every element of kind of music management. And I'm still involved with them now. You know, I still do their professional development, things like that. But yeah, you know, that first couple of years was a massive kind of learning curve being back in it. But I'm kind of glad it went that way. I don't think I would have been very happy being one of these people who kind of goes straight into a management company and kind of gets shown the ropes. You know, I'm quite lucky that I'd done other stuff beforehand.
Do you think an artist today needs someone with a lot of experience or it's perfectly okay if the artist has the vision, the creative vision. Is it okay for them to find someone that's a bit more green as far as their background experience, and just grow together? If that artist is very new, but on the cusp of maybe exploding, starting to get a lot of attention here and there.
I've got really mixed feelings on that, because I do think growing with an artist is important, but I also, I've got a few things that are kind of immediately jump into my head with that. It's like, firstly, I think a lot of new artists, 95% of them don't need management. And there seems to have been a bit of a phase, particularly with UK artists, where a small artist, before they'd even put out more than like a couple of records, they would get management. And I always find that kind of strange. But I also think, when a kind of artist is starting to get a bit of traction, and maybe they get a friend to do their management, and that person hasn't had a lot of rooting in the music industry in general, it becomes problematic. Yeah. Because there's a lot of information that you need to know to be able to work with an artist like effectively, and to kind of really maximize their careers. And don't get me wrong, there are some artists who work with managers who are purely just rainmakers, who are purely just, their contacts, their connections and things like that. But if you have a manager who also doesn't know how to make sure that your music is registered with performing rights societies, and you have a manager who doesn't need to involve a solicitor every time you have a recording contract put in front of you, then either you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to end up in a situation where you have to outsource everything, and you're going to end up with huge slices of your income disappearing.
So you really have to try to gain as much knowledge and experience in every aspect of what you would typically outsource to, like maybe a lawyer, or you understand promo, obviously. You got to understand these days the whole social media angle. The industry is constantly evolving and changing, and it's almost like the Wild West again. And we're trying to see what sticks, and you have to constantly stay on top of emerging technologies and platforms.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, but also I think if you find a manager who is complaining about the fact that they have to, then they're probably not in it for the wrong reasons, because it is interesting. That's one of the good bits of the job, is that, you wake up every day and there's something new that you've either got to deal with or get your head around, or, there's another interesting area that your artist can actually earn, some money about. And I don't mean like earning millions, and I don't mean, let's kind of purely focus on the money. But I think the last 3 or 4 months has kind of really slapped a lot of managers around the face and made them realize that, like, look, if you weren't looking after your artist performing rights income, if you weren't looking after artist royalties, if you weren't looking after these little things that can make a huge difference when your artist isn't touring, then, you're not doing the job properly. And it's really important to kind of, to have a manager who I think really cares about all of this stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know some very successful managers who, they are very good at what they do, but they also wouldn't be able to do it without a lawyer permanently attached to them, or an accountant permanently attached to them, or, other advisors. And there is a place for that, don't get me wrong, because I think experts have to exist. There's plenty of stuff that I wouldn't feel comfortable doing. But I think as a manager, you have to have a fundamental understanding of every element of the music industry.
You said something just before where you said 95% of the artists out there don't really need a manager. How do you define the difference between an artist that wants a manager because, I don't know, it adds some gravitas to their profile, or they can boast about it, and someone who needs one?
Well,
how do you determine that? And how would an artist also, from the artist perspective, when is it appropriate for an artist to look for management, or start to explore those options?
I think I bet you guys have actually experienced the kind of side effect of these sort of conversations before, where you have
talk about us. No.
No, but you know what I mean. Like you'll have a DJ come up to you going, "Guys, I need to get an agent because I need to get."
Yeah.
right? And I'm always saying, well, look, if you're not getting gigs, you don't need an agent. You just need to work harder on your music. An agent won't get you gigs. An agent will handle the administration. And it's very much like a manager. A manager can definitely open doors for artists, but the artist has to kind of be there enough to make sure that, that works properly. And one of the things that I kind of always have as a good barometer is like, if an artist is tearing their hair out because they don't know what to do next with the business side of things, but they have opportunities, that's when you get a manager. Yeah. So, like whether you're already established or whether you're coming up, if suddenly you put out a release on a small label and you get a Beatport #1, for example, like suddenly you're going to have all of these opportunities coming in your direction. And some of those opportunities will be really, really easy to say yes or no to. And the point when you involve a manager is when you don't know whether to say yes or no.
And is it important for the manager to be a fan or no? I asked that because a while ago I watched the documentary on, I can't remember his name right now, but he managed Alice Cooper and went on to manage a lot of legendary names. And then he was like instrumental in representing chefs when chefs started to become celebrities via the food shows. But he never liked, and he masterminded Alice Cooper's career and made him a lot of money. And, Alice Cooper's sort of a legend, a lot in part, I think, due to his manager, but like the manager wasn't really a fan of the music.
I think I'm going to kind of say some mitigating stuff. So I think with someone like Alice Cooper, you're managing like a freight train. So an artist manager there in that case will be predominantly dealing with teams of touring professionals and kind of solicitors and stuff. So actually, weirdly, they're quite detached from the art in a lot of senses. But in electronic music, no. I've actually got to sit and listen to all my artists' music, and sometimes I've got to have an A&R hat on and be like, okay, well, is this the best you can do? So no, you have to have two hats on. So you have to be a fan, because you have to want to be able to spend that amount of time listening to their music. So, you have to sort of understand it and appreciate it. But in the same breath, you also have to be able to stand back from your personal feelings on it and go, okay, is this objectively good? But yeah, I can't imagine not being kind of into what the people I work with do. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the past, I've kind of had some management relationships where the kind of music started to go in a direction that I've not been that passionate in. But the fact that I talk about those in the past tense should probably tell you something there.
I think, I think most managers are drawn to the acts that they work with by purely out of the fact that they maybe love them or they've heard them and they're attracted to them. I think that's from my experience, that's what happens. And that's, again, leads to them maybe making great videos with them or pushing or creating this dynamic where they can both work together because they maybe have a mutual love of the same thing. I mean, and I think, as Dean said, I think especially in electronic music, you've got to love the guy you work with or girl you work with, because you'll probably be on tour with them, around them for a lot of time, a long time. So,
yeah.
Dean, is it important for the artist to have a very strong creative vision, or is it perfectly okay if you see the potential, but they don't really know what to do with it? And then you can come in, and do you view that as like a challenge that draws you into the art of managing artists?
I mean, there's definitely the challenge element. So, the kind of the first act that I started working with, it was all a little bit chaos. There was a lot of questions, kind of didn't know what directions to go in. But again, I think as an artist manager, you don't want to go in and impose what you think. You want to go in and go, look, let's clear away the noise. Let's look at your options objectively, and let's work on a path together that kind of fits in. And it gets difficult when you work with artists that don't have a clear artistic vision, but then you can build a strategy around that, because that's when you go, okay, well, we're not going to do an album. we're not going to sign to one individual label. We're going to create a path which is going to allow you to experiment, and we'll make that part of what you are as an artist. So I think whether the artist has a really clear vision or not, you can kind of work with it, and you can kind of you kind of build around that.
And,
So
and
do-
is it, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, so especially nowadays with DJ promos being such like, I think for a lot of DJs like myself, sometimes it gets annoying because there's so many services and promos out there, and just like it's just so much music. But how? Well, I know you're a little bit biased because you own a promo company, but how important do you think it is to have a DJ promo?
Ah, I could talk about this all day long, because we have very different views. You guys are all established, touring, very busy DJs in certain positions of your careers where I actually think, you know, if you guys do a record DJ promo, in some cases isn't actually that useful. But look, I like spending time talking to established DJs about this, because I think it's really important you guys understand how important it is when you take the time to feedback or download music. Firstly, I think there's a contract, and like, you know, when I made myself sick sending stamps, putting stamps on a record, I knew that would go to a DJ, and the deal was that DJ got that music up front. If they played it out, they could have the courtesy to let us know. And those faxes coming through with those established DJs' names could change people's careers. Now, with the kind of
I would spend 24 hours sometimes just faxing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was crazy. And honestly, the differences it made were huge. I mean, huge. And now I think there's abundance of digital promos. And unfortunately, I think 90% of the labels who use digital promos, or even PR companies that use them very irresponsibly. They don't target very well. They don't think about who's on the other end. But if we put that to one side and we look at purely what DJ promo can do. So if you go and talk to Beatport, or you go and talk to Spotify, one of the biggest things that they're going to expect from a small label, or a label getting started, or a label that's kind of mid-range, is to see DJ support. So, you know, when you're delivering your information to Beatport 3 weeks out, and if you want to get one of their much coveted features, then you kind of need to prove to them that DJs are behind it. So they still view what DJs they are, but it's a taste. But on top of that, you know, we're a PR company, so we get to use it in different ways. So, you know, 2 weeks before release, when we service radio DJs with a promo, particularly the really big ones, like the ones in the UK who do Radio 1, we kind of need to go to their show's producers with like, look, Radio Slave's playing this. I mean, I wouldn't say that because Matt never bothers reacting, but like, you know, I can find out from them. But, you know, I can say, look, we've got plays from these guys, and it's incredibly important, and it will make a difference because it opens doors for smaller labels.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you know, DJ promo has a use. I mean, one thing I would say for established artists as well is that using DJ promo might not necessarily have an impact on your sales or your label in general, or kind of how well you're going to do with Beatport or Spotify, right? Because you're at a stage in your career where chances are, because of your sales track record, you're going to get that support anyway. So those doors are already open for you. However, sometimes it's really important for you guys to be getting your music into the hands of artists who are coming through. So one of the things that I've always been really passionate about is making sure that we add DJs who are like really hyped or coming through on little scenes to our mailing lists. So, you know, we've never been a company that just service A-list DJs and we get the same old names coming back. We will kind of add these emerging scene DJs. And it's great because you'll get some clients going, oh, I've never heard of that person. And then, you know, 3 months later, they've got a Resident Advisor podcast. And actually, I think a lot of the newer talent, they wouldn't necessarily go and check a release on a more established artist's label or a more established artist out, because they'll think, I've seen that name everywhere. You know when you get label fatigue. So you stop buying a certain label because you've just kind of seen it too much and it's doing the same thing. Well, you know, that happens with artists. So, you know, I think, anyway, long and short of it is DJ promo can be a real tool for good, and DJs feeding back can be an incredibly positive tool for good.
I think the feedbacks are really, you know, for me running my SciTech label, for the young artists who don't have a lot of exposure that I like to, you know, give a platform to via my label. They really enjoy the feedback from like the industry names, you know.
Yeah. You know,
it's like Christmas Day when they get that feedback sheet and they see all the comments, they read it. It gives them a huge confidence.
Downloaded by.
Even downloaded.
Downloaded for. What about someone downloading the promos for you?
Yeah. Well, you got to think. I've seen all of your DJ feedback, so I know who does that and who doesn't. So if anyone wants to know, come and talk.
But look, how like the whole promo thing. How do you see it these days? Like back in the day, you would want to promo well in advance of the release, but after a while, we all started to realize, does that really make a difference? Do people, you know, in the vinyl era? Yeah, that did. Because if you didn't have that physical piece of vinyl, then you weren't playing it. You didn't have it. But when digital promos came along, it seemed like a lot of people were still hung up on the old way of doing things. And it took a long time for people to realize that, well, you know, as long as it's good, it doesn't matter when it was released or when you send it to somebody. You could send it to your promo list the day of the release and it'll get the plays.
There's an enormous amount of debate about this, and the reality
ask the question.
Yeah, no, I don't. The reality is that the one size fits all model doesn't work. So, you know, we like to sit down with clients and go, okay, well, what do you want to get out of this? So, you know, there are some hard and fast things. So, you know, a vinyl distributor will want, you know, a certain vinyl distributors will want their information like 3-4 weeks ahead of release when they start pre-selling it. So you'll need a bit of promo feedback on it. Beatport, they'll want their information 3 weeks before release. Spotify, maybe it's 2 weeks before, depending on your relationship with your distributor and their relationship with Spotify. And then you also have to factor in the fact that, you know, little things like now, if you get radio play before release date, Spotify are going to shit themselves and say, we won't support you with marketing support. So yeah, it's really difficult now. Now you have to kind of have a strategy based on where you are, which sites or where you want to sell your records, what the priority is. But generally promotion lead times are much shorter, mainly because also a lot of the press is online. So, you know,
I'm going to get to press in a second.
That's going to be
like, is there a huge difference in those time frames between like vinyl promos and digital promos? Do they work hand in hand, or how do you adjust your promo cycle when you have a release that's coming out on vinyl as well? I guess Matt can also answer this question. I don't do too much vinyl on my label.
So, I mean, Matt, you generally do vinyl release date the same as digital now, yeah?
Yeah, we do exactly the same because, I mean, it makes absolutely no difference. And also I think people tried to stagger it for a while, as Dean knows, with working on with these labels. Everyone tried to stagger it, saying vinyl first, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you only have a really, really small time frame with your release to make sure that people will hear it. So you have to attack all formats.
What is that time frame to you? To record? For records, what is that time frame?
Well, it depends on the artist, but I mean, we usually know within the first 2 weeks whether something's going to stick, and then we, you know, whether we can continue the PR campaign will continue, but you know, maybe we need to look at other avenues or things to really give it a boost. But generally speaking, you know, within the first week of the release date whether or not it's gonna stick, you know, or go into the charts, or the record shops will reorder it, which these days you never know, because the record, a lot of record shops at the moment are either shut or they're only doing online ordering, and the orders, a record shop maybe even like Hardwax, where they might have ordered 50, maybe now they're ordering 10 or 5, and then there's so much new stuff coming in every week that they're not going to reorder. So that's why it's really important to do digital vinyl on the same day.
I've been ever since the day one with Truncate. I've always waited at least a couple of weeks before I release the digital when the vinyl comes out. Yeah. And I've only done that just because that's what the distributor would suggest. But then I've been thinking lately, I'm like, does it even matter anymore? Is it still going to sell?
I mean, that's even more so, especially with things like Instagram, or especially if you're promoting a record on social media, then that means you've got to do it in 2 waves. You've got to do it on the digital release, 1 week. And for a lot of people, they just, when they hear it or when you do a preview, they want to have a buy link and they want to know where they can get it that week. Yeah. And that's why, especially when there were festivals going, that's why, so many people are doing well off Shazam, because, if the record was available when a DJ played it, these records would, they would sell super well, because then people are like, I can buy this, so.
Isn't it worth exploring the idea of promoting a record more than just once, though? Because I think music has such an incredibly short shelf life.
Yeah, for sure.
You post something and people see it, and then it's old news instantly. And then you're surprised that if you promote a record 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even a month later, the amount of people who didn't even hear the first one.
I think things like doing videos and stuff like that for tracks, you can do these months after the release. I mean, things that will give it another lease of life. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure Dean can tell us other ways to keep the.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Does it make sense to even do another PR campaign after a record is out?
Weirdly, there's things on the digital marketing end of things that you can do. So we like, obviously now we are all burdened with statistics. So we can all log into our Spotify for Artists account or other various tools like Chartmetric or something like that and see. So say, for example, you could have a record out that's have been out for a year, and then out of nowhere, it gets added to a Spotify playlist that has 3 million followers, right? Suddenly, you've got this huge upsurge in interest in it. And then that upsurge can spill over into, say, Beatport. And you can kind of spot these little upticks. And then you go, okay, well, as a label, back in the day, what people would have done was repackage, re-release. But now it's like, okay, well, do you repackage and re-release? Because essentially, it's not going to add anything to the package unless you're going to add remixes in it. So what you can do then is go, okay, well, we'll start using this information. So yeah, you can then go resurface it to radio and say, look, we've had a huge upsurge in interest in this. Do you, as radio people, want to be like left behind on Spotify? And you kind of go back out there. But I would say, in terms of revisiting records purely from a PR point of view, from like press and radio, it's always going to be difficult. But from a digital marketing point of view, you can spot that traction rebuilding, and you can go, okay, I might reservice it to DJs because it might have fallen on flat ears a little bit around. And also, you can go, okay, well, I'm going to start posting about it on social media again. And, you can really take advantage of it. This is why it's really interesting, I think, for record labels, way more than artists. This is mainly about labels, to constantly look at their back catalogue and look at how it's performing, because you get these weird little spikes. Spencer, who I look after, like one of his album tracks from last year popped up as an Apple's, like, it was number 2 in Apple's like dance chart in Korea 3 weeks ago. And I was like, okay. So then I started looking and going, okay, well, has Spencer had a social media like uptick in Korea? And obviously I'm not going to do it right now because frankly, we've got other records going on. But, if we were in a kind of different period, I might have said, okay, well, why don't we do a really targeted Facebook ad campaign based on Korea and try and push that up and see if we can turn it into something. So it's like, this is one of the things about, we can all complain about, how streaming services and kind of Beatport and digital and kind of, it's not as kind of fun as the vinyl days, and it's not as kind of raw. But one of the things that's glorious about it is that you've got access to so much information, and if you really spend the time looking at that information, you can really help your career along. And look, you know, a lot of people are making music because they want to get gigs because that's where the money is. But I'll say again, you know, the last 6 months have taught us that making sure that your records do well and making sure that you get every cent out of them is really important.
Yeah.
How important do you think an album is to release for an artist these days?
Because I was going to ask the same question. Like, what, you know, in this singles driven kind of industry that we're living in now, how viable is the album format to a DJ / producer who usually makes club music? When they tell you, when your artist comes to you and said, Dean, I'm working on an album, like, do you roll your eyes, or what do you?
Because it seems like music. I mean, dance music revolves pretty quickly. It's always kind of like in and out. But if you spend an extended period of time on an album, like 6 months for whatever reason, it's disheartening to think that like it you know, it's out for a couple weeks where people are listening to it and then just kind of vanishes. You know. I
mean, I asked Chris this question when he was playing me demos in my car of his next album, and he had a great answer for it. He said, I'm like, how do you decide that you want to release an album? He's like, well, I make a lot of music, and if I find that all these tracks belong together in a cohesive way, then it's pointing me in that direction of, okay, this should be an album. These songs belong together, as opposed to maybe an artist who feels like they want to extend the promo campaign or the shelf life of this album project by releasing it piecemeal in singles throughout, you know, spaced out throughout the year, which prolongs the campaign as opposed to having like a focused campaign over a very short period of time, which is typical of like an album. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think, well, initially, so as early as sort of 5 years ago, or as recently as 5 years ago, like artists, well, managers and DJ agents would all bang on about the thing called the album cycle. Oh yeah, we need to get into the album cycle because then, you know, and a lot of it was kind of very marketing driven. So essentially, you know, your artist would stop releasing for like, you know, 3 to 6 months. You'd gear up towards an album. You'd have a preceding single, then you'd drop the album, then you'd have another 2 singles. In amongst it, the agent would be using all of the marketing drag to build a tour. So that you built a ride off that for a year. But the problem is that, you know, when agents and managers say that a lot, what happens is it becomes part of the landscape. So then you get artists going, oh, well, you know, I've got to do my album now. And it's just like, all right, well, yeah, but have you got an album in you, or is it just going to be 12 tracks that are shit, that wouldn't stand on their own two singles? And when you listen to most albums, that's the case, isn't it? You know, I mean, like, I don't mean shit, but I do mean shit.
We'll call it a double pack or something.
Well, Dean, what do you do? And you can finish your point after that. What do you do if an artist who's known for making a particular style of music tells you, oh, I have been working on an album that I want to release, and this is what it sounds like, and you listen to it, and it doesn't represent what the artist represents to his or her fans?
You have some really fucking difficult conversations. The reality is that does it boil down to, like, is it good? And is it, look, if an artist comes to me and they do something they're not known for, but it's fucking brilliant, you find a way of making it work. You find a way of kind of making, I mean, look, we're having a conversation about artists who kind of do hugely different musical styles and stuff, and we've got Matt there sat in the corner who, you know, is the master of it. So, you know, if
you call him the machine.
It's like, you know, I think if the music's good, a good manager and a good agent will kind of find a way of making that work. So yeah.
So you trust the artist in their creative vision, and you try to execute that vision. But if you feel that they're making the wrong career move, you're not afraid of letting them know, right?
You have a moral obligation to let them know. Whether they listen to you or not is another question. But you have to, like, if someone's going to make a mistake, you have to say, yeah, like this is not a good idea. But you have to have good reasons for it. You have to have better reasons than, oh, I think this might be really hard to sell to your fans. That's not.
Yeah, I think it comes down, like a lot of things, to the motivation, right? And you probably would ask the artist, like, what is your motivation to do that album? Is it because you want to have an album? And you, as you said, you put 10 tracks together that could be like bad singles as well. I think it comes down to the motivation. And the other question, is it good or is it crap?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And do you think, Dean, so 2020, is this a good year to release an album?
Yes, the $1 million question.
You could have ended that sentence, is 2020, is this a good year? The answer is no, and we should all move on from it as quickly as possible. But yeah, look, perhaps. I mean, it's now been proved to us that the last 6 months has been really good for record sales, despite clubs not existing. It's been a really good time for radio play. It's even been a good time for vinyl sales, despite small record shops shutting. The bigger online stores have seen massive uptick in sales. It's also been a really good time for artists to think of weird and wonderful ways of connecting with people who are into their music. Things like DJ talk shows online. Who'd have thought we'd be doing that? But this is the thing. So it's like, okay, well, who's to say if you'd written an album by March, that putting it out in June and having this huge worldwide captive audience wouldn't be a good thing.
But how do you think with the current sort of press situation with magazines? I mean, is that getting any better? Do you think as this COVID thing continues, has that readjusted? I mean, is that now a better place for artists to work and get maybe the recognition if they do want to release an album, or is it it's still bad? Is it still not?
Yeah, like how important is that record review?
It massively depends. It doesn't. Things like reviews and press don't exist in a vacuum.
In the old days, I used to read all of the reviews, and I would base my record buying on the reviews. I would make lists based on the reviewer feedback. This is very early on.
But probably you had trusted sources as well.
You had trusted sources. Yeah, the reviews editor for that particular section, that genre, was trusted. Not all of them, but some of them. And you always wanted to get your records into their hands. And they only had a certain amount of space, and they had to cram in so much music into that little space. So it was quite a thing. And over time, obviously, that's become less and less important for an artist. Like, how important is a review? Aren't there so many other ways of getting the word out and bypassing the traditional channels without naming names?
No, massively. And this is something that I constantly talk to artists about. It's like, sometimes we have people come to us and go, all right, here's like, as a PR company, here's the record, do your thing. And then 2 weeks after release, I'll have a conversation with them and going like, look, what were you doing with the reports that we sent you? And they were like, oh, we're just forwarding them to the distributor. And I'm like, what? So you weren't using any of this content that you were getting via your socials? You weren't using it to feed back to stores? You weren't record reviews don't count like they used to. But the reason why, one of the main reasons why they don't count like they used to, was because there is so many other ways of discovering music compared to they used to be. Before it was like, if you got a review in Jockey Slut or Mixmag, that was it. That was the big deal, right? And now it's like, there's 1,000,001 blogs, there's SoundCloud channels, there's DJ streams, there's DJ feedback. And strictly speaking, from a manager level or from a PR company or marketing company end, you kind of need to have an eye on all of them. So I would say, they don't have the weight that they once had, but also they shouldn't be entirely ignored.
Yeah.
But the press landscape at the minute is really tough. It's really tough. We've just had Mixmag sort of commit to not doing any physical product until next year. So there's a lot of journalists there who are out of work, sadly. DJ Mag have just come back with their first print issue, but, you know, I think they're still operating on a relative skeleton staff. Resident Advisor operating on a skeleton staff at the minute. It's a really difficult time, and I know a lot of people have been having very speculative conversations about the music scene as a whole, about clubs and about DJs and kind of what's going to happen next. But I have a kind of real hope that people start to look at magazines and writers and actually realize that there are some really good ones out there, ones who can be trusted. But if we want to kind of read them or care about them, we need to do what we do with record labels and DJs, is we need to put our hands in the pockets and pay for them. Yeah. So I'm hoping, like, what I would love to see, my little kind of new sort of journalism utopia would be to see more subscription-only blogs where you pay a couple of quid or a couple of dollars a month to read a small blog where a journalist who's probably earning proper money elsewhere can passionately put up their music. I mean, it's weird, you know, when I think about sort of 10, 15 years ago when we had blogs like Little White Earbuds and stuff like that, and it was like, God, that was the golden days probably. Yeah. And now, you know, we have a few really, really big sites, and, you know, we have a lot of small ones that are, you know, inconsequential in terms of their influence. But
I remember, like, when I lost the faith in record reviews was when I would see the promo text that I would write, because I loved writing those things. I would write it for the promo, and then I would see the reviewers who have the platform to come up with their own words to describe this piece of music that they want to write about. They would just copy and paste and paraphrase whatever I wrote. And this happened for so many years that I was like, this is a joke. Why do I bother? You know?
This God, I mean, like, I have quite a pragmatic view of it. There's always been shit lazy writers, just like there's always been shit lazy producers. And but there are some really good ones out there, like Resident Advisor's former editor, Ryan Keeling. He can write a review, man. It's very difficult I think, sum a dance floor record up, particularly now with the history that electronic music has, and you know how, you know, a lot of music kind of repeats itself or draws on older influences. But, you know, there are some people who are really good at it. Marcus Barnes, who was the technology was really good and still is really good, and he's doing a great newsletter at the minute. You know, there's some really good people out there, but you've kind of got to sort through it, and you've got to find the ones that you, have a little bit of faith in.
I think I'd rather spend my time sorting through music than sorting through reviews, but
of course you would. But you're a professional, so you know.
I think for the most part, I've never really been fond of people's opinions of music, because music is so incredibly subjective. And like, I've read reviews where people just slag off records as the worst piece of shit, and then I go and I listen to them like, fuck, this is good. Yeah. You know, and you start finding yourself looking for reviews that give bad reviews, because those are more than likely the records you're going to like the most.
But like, who's reading this stuff?
Yeah, you know what? Not professional DJs. Like, I always find it weird when, like,
maybe I should ask the people who aren't professionals who are watching. Are you reading record reviews and then deciding what to buy or not, or are you discovering it on your own? Are you going down the Beatport or Hardwax or Clone or whatever Juno rabbit hole, and because there's a certain sense of excitement in you doing the work, putting in the hours, and discovering that music yourself, rather than being told by a record reviewer. On the same token, you know, you have like movie critics, you know, who like to write endlessly about what they think a movie means, and
let me just add something on top of that with the reviews. Sorry, Dean. One thing too is, like, I've noticed where a lot of people, instead of actually digging for music, they'll just go to DJ charts.
I think
they'll look at what DJs are playing and say, okay, cool, this guy, you know, he's playing this, so I'm going to buy it. Because I've noticed upticks in sales and tracks that have been charted You know what I mean? So I feel like the DJ chart is also the similar as a review as well.
Groove Magazine, Groove Magazine in Germany, I think has the best chart pages, or it did have. It was amazing. You go straight to these and just look through. They were always very up to date, very, current, even when the magazines were published. So
that was already end of the 90s when Groove Magazine came out, I remember, and we get it in our hands on a Thursday. You walk into Delirium record store, and the record store already had, like, for example, Sven Väth's top 10. He ordered them like multiple times because he knew people would be coming in and just pick all these 10 records and buy them. That was already end of the 90s, middle of the 90s, the case.
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful thing to go to a DJ or an artist or a musician that you highly look up to and see the music that you're curating. I mean, I think if all of us, every DJ in the world, spent more time promoting records and making charts and making playlists and stuff like that, it would help out tremendously for everybody.
Mm.
I mean, like with Bandcamp these days, there's so much music on Bandcamp that's incredible, but it's so difficult to navigate through it because there's no way of finding things organically. It's like you have to go because it's there. And with these Bandcamp Fridays going on that, artists get 100% of the revenue, why aren't all of us sitting down and curating our top 10 favorite albums on Bandcamp for people to go and support them during these times as well?
That's a really good question. Why aren't you?
I do myself. Personally, I really try to, but I mean, I can't speak for everybody.
I think charts are very important. I fail miserably at staying on top of doing them.
I used to love charts. There used to be a magazine in the UK called Update, and it was in every record shop, and you'd walk in and it was a kind of list, and you pull it out, it was like a fold out thing, and there was reviewers in there that actually you could have a bit of faith in. And actually, weirdly more, there were certain reviewers in there that I knew if they gave a record a shit review, chances are I'd like it. And like I'd be sat there with my Update magazine, I'd be like, oh, have you got this? Have you got this? And like, but I think that was also part of the disconnect between reading records and being able to hear stuff, which is something you can do now. You can hear a lot of music very quickly. So maybe the written word is slightly diminished. But to speak on the charts thing, look, I see it every day. Like, a certain artist charts a record, and man, like sales just immediate. Like, we'll go like that. Which is also why, and I'll go back to this again, because there are some people in this list who don't always provide feedback to DJ promos, and they know who they are, is that's why some people really, really care about getting feedback. They get that sign. And, DJs who are in positions of like where they've got huge amounts of fans, just putting a record in a chart can inspire so many people to go. Because look, what are you as a DJ if you're not an arbiter of taste?
Yeah.
If you strip away everything, the performance, the mixing or whatever, you're a guy or a girl who knows how to choose records well. That's what you've learned how to do. And that cosign is huge.
I think what we haven't nailed with the DJ promo feedback is like how we give that feedback. And you have to look at like how we listen to that music. I'll get a promo from Fat Drop or whoever, and either it's going directly into Dropbox, which I never check, or I just download it. It goes into my iTunes, and then I listen to it when I'm working or when I'm exercising or when I'm on the plane going through promos, and I'm not able to give feedback where in the context of where I'm listening to it. So I haven't seen anybody really address that.
Well, I think it's also, going back to when Dane Tenaglia was on the show and, talking about record pools. I think breaking a record and DJ promos 20 years ago was such a completely different. I mean, do DJs really break records, or is there already so much noise out there? I mean, Dean, can you elaborate on this, especially with obviously DJs aren't touring now, but as we know, a lot of guys that are playing, a lot of A-list DJs aren't breaking new records, are they?
But it's like everything else that I've discussed tonight. There's no silver bullet anymore.
Yeah.
There's no one factor in building a record that makes a huge difference. don't get me wrong, there'll be certain kind of subsets where a certain DJ will play a record. So, like, you know, if Ricardo Villalobos plays a record and is playing it for a summer, there's going to be a certain kind of following that will fetishize that record, and it may dribble over into other areas. And very occasionally there are the records, but you know, you have to think, like, touring scenes now are so disparate and far apart. So, like, what I would find is back in the day when people were talking about records being broken, they were talking about them being broken because they were being played in a specific country by DJs, and most of those DJs, you know, touring wasn't as full on as it is now.
They had the time to play them to a regular crowd. They also, you know, New York, you'd have record executives turning up, checking the record, other DJs there listening to that DJ. So
that's it. So, but no, there's no silver bullet now. I mean, don't get me, you do still get them. Certain DJs, you know, if certain videos start cropping up regularly, especially in Facebook groups, you see.
I mean, I was going to say, I mean, there's no videos this year.
No, but there's way more streams. And
way more streams.
Actually provided
what are your thoughts on the live streaming craze?
I have,
and not like how it is now during obviously this crisis where we can't play, and how it will evolve when things start to open up.
My feeling on streaming is complicated. So I feel like with streaming, we were all conned into thinking it was the best idea for promotion ever. And in some ways it had promotional value, but I think it's also massively devalued DJing, but also not just the DJs and performances, but also the records that are being played on them, because let's face it, most streams, the artists don't receive any money from that. Theoretically, if a DJ plays a record in a club, an artist, if the chain works, which it often doesn't, you know, the artist receives some money. So it's problematic in terms of like people actually doing well out of it. And we've all been conned into thinking that we should be doing DJ sets for free.
Are they getting revenue even from YouTube, like streaming on YouTube? Because sometimes when I do a live stream on YouTube, I get like monetizing is not possible. It's being forwarded to the artist.
Yeah, you will with YouTube, and you know, Boiler Room and things like that. You will get like performing rights payments on, but it's incredibly low, and it's not stable.
But do you think like do you think, let's say you know, with the streaming live streams, artists aren't getting paid, but I feel like a lot of artists don't really care about that. They care more about the exposure rather than getting the $1 for 1,000 streams.
This is why I said it's really problematic, because even if you remove the artists from it, from a DJ point of view, you can be one of the biggest DJs in the world, and doing a Boiler Room is still advantageous in terms of growing your audience. But I do feel that we've got to a stage where it's become so ubiquitous that we have to kind of, I don't know, at some point we're going to have to push the button and go, okay, well, is there a fairer, more interesting way of doing this that kind of remunerates artists and the DJs doing it? And I think that will happen, because I think there's been there's a big group of managers that we've all been talking since the beginning of lockdown, where we're like, okay, well, you know, is there better ways to do it? And there's a lot of innovation. So Mixcloud's format seems to be very good. And I think that will slowly start to happen, because the thing is that will start to happen because the rights management element of it is going to start being pushed from major labels. So they'll always change things.
You know, it's a difficult path, because I've noticed on my path, once the lockdown started, I felt like I want to share my music, and especially to those hardest hit people like in Spain and Italy, you know, and you just want to play and give them an experience for free that they at least have at home. So you do that a couple of weeks, and you keep doing that, and at some point you realize, you know, I really actually would love to see all the money that like that somebody makes. Like Mo says, if you stream on YouTube, you get all the copyright claims. Obviously, I'm not monetizing any of my videos, but even if you would, you can't, because the money goes where? To YouTube? Okay, so you want to change that thing. And, you know, this is the difficult path that you are on as an artist. I've already been thinking about it. I'm on Mixcloud Select. You can find me there. and you can find a lot of music on there which no one else can find. But they have the live streaming opportunity now, and it actually works perfectly. I mean, I think it's still in beta phase, that all the tracks get analyzed. The money, they have contracts with all the labels. The money goes to the label. But what I want to come to, the point is, I've done now, for example, loads of streams for free. You would at some point say to your audience, like, guys, that's it. I'm not doing this for free anymore. The backlash will be immense, because people by now are used to it getting for free. Oh, now he wants money for it, And this is why I've actually postponed that idea so far, because I have no real solution yet.
I don't think anyone does, because this situation hasn't been forced by us, by managers or creators within electronic music. It's been forced by the wider landscape and by big technology, YouTube and SoundCloud, streaming platforms, Spotify. The kind of devaluation of music. And obviously the side element of that is devaluation of DJs who are actually, creating something out of that music. But I think, with pressure on the platforms that already exist, and also wanting to create new platforms where, okay, the money doesn't have to come from users, because let's face it, Chris, you're perfectly right. That ship has sailed. But, if you look at the current platforms, Boiler Room, who go through YouTube, Boiler Room make money.
Yeah.
Why are the artists not getting any money? And
yeah, but
this is an incredibly nuanced debate. Yes. We should be having it on Twitter. But the whole point is that I don't have any answers on this. All I know is that, one, we're in a situation of our own making. We've kind of sleepwalked into it, and two, there is a lot of good that can come from streams, promotionally and kind of reaching your audience and stuff like that. But it needs to change.
Gene, going back to management, for the young producers who are watching, how does an up and coming producer get potential managers interested in them? How do they get your attention?
I've always had a bit of a weird thing where, like, if someone comes to you, then chances are they're not in the right position. I feel like a good manager will really have their eye on who's worth approaching, and the ones. Don't get me wrong, there's no hard and fast in this. It depends on the individual manager, but I don't think I've ever received a demo and went, yeah, this person needs management. Because also it's a lot more complicated than just the music being good. A lot of artists can do very well managing their own careers, and they can have longevity and stuff like that.
I think we haven't covered that. Who are you managing at the moment? Who is your roster?
I look after Ben Sims, and I look after Spencer Parker, and I look after Manpower. And that's enough for me.
Hey, Dean, did you, I probably asked this before in person, but did you know Ben before you were managing him, or did you get to know him during?
Yeah, no. So I was Ben's. So I did, like, a long time ago. I was Drumcode's PR, and then Ben did his album on Drumcode, and Ben's like brilliant, but he's also one of these people who he's involved in everything he does. He's not like have this, I'm going to forget about it. Ben really cares about what he's doing. So, while I was doing the PR on his album, I was dealing with Ben a lot. And then, we stopped doing the album. I think I was doing some PR for him. And, we would have our meetings in East London, and there'd always be a couple of pints. And also, I was always in awe of Ben. I loved what Ben did. And then we got to know each other. And then, we ended up having a beer at Sonar. And he was like, well, I think maybe I'm at a stage now where I'm interested in management. And I don't think I'd ever told him that I was doing management at the time. And I was like, oh, well, actually, I'm managing a couple of acts now, and PR's like my minor thing. And then, that was it. I think that was six years ago now. So we've been working together since then.
And this will bring me to my next question. Is like, now that you become friends, how do you separate the friendship with the management? Because there has to be at least some sort of like, you know, you have a little empathy with them and you feel like you want to make the best decision without pissing them off as a friend, or do you completely separate that?
Oh, it's fucking impossible. I mean, like, you know, like I'd be staggered to find any managers who don't become friends with their artists.
Yeah.
To have that relationship, which is really close, particularly when, you know, we're talking electronic music here. We're not talking teams of 15, 20 people and touring staff and stuff like that. You're talking a relatively intimate relationship. And particularly when, you know, you end up traveling a little bit with people, you get to know them really well. And it sometimes it is difficult to think, okay, well, you know, this is my mate. In a lot of ways, it's really positive because, you know, you sat there going, well, actually, this is someone who I really give a shit about and I don't want to make mistakes for. But it's also sometimes where you have to go, particularly when I think being like saying harsh truths and stuff, that's when it gets more tricky. And
yeah, that's what I mean.
and it is hard. It is hard. But ultimately, it has to. You know, you kind of have to do it. You've got a responsibility.
Dean, did you ever think about writing a book? I mean, I've learned so many insights in the last 1.5 hours of what you're talking about, and this is like incredible value information.
I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
I know we barely scratched the surface.
We scratched it, but there's so much incredible information already about for young artists. Which brings me to my question: what would you warn young artists for? What the pitfalls are of the dark side of management, and especially I would be talking about like. I mean, there's been stories of the music industry as old as the music industry is that managers basically take the money or just fool their artists. I have my fair share of this in the past years. And even though you think you know this person and you're almost friends with this person for over a while, you realize like what I didn't see things coming like this towards me. Like, you know, some of your colleagues in that business probably don't work as more on a moral high ground as they should be. And what are the pitfalls? What are the warning, the red flags that come up that you would say to young artists, like, if that manager tells you this, just avoid him? Like,
I think particularly early on, if a manager comes and says to you, like, we can make you do this and we can make this happen, it's like be careful of promises, because in most cases, like, you know, it's just wishful thinking.
It's better to under promise and over deliver anyway. Then
yeah. And you know, I think so. Yeah, like beware of big promises, but also when you enter into a relationship with a manager, like set out your terms. So like ask them the questions about how they work. Like, is there going to be a degree of transparency? Is there going to be major decisions made without you? Like, and also, like, from an artist point of view, you need to immediately learn to have the strength of character to say to someone, even if that person is 20 years older than you and has 20 years more experience, I don't agree with that. Like, you know, I have over the years worked with some people who have, not because of kind of sort of been intimidated or anything, but they've been happy to kind of sort of let other people do stuff for them. And then they've kind of been like, oh, actually, shit, that was bad. So you've got, it's really important to have an interest in your career and an interest in what your management are doing and everyone around you, what they're doing. But the biggest thing to avoid any awful situations is, and this is whether you've got a manager or not, is just get a really good accountant.
Yeah.
As accountants,
keep it separate, right? Keep it.
No, but wait, stop. Can I like, isn't part of management also dealing with the financial situation of your artist?
It is.
So a big red flag would be, obviously, like if a manager comes to you and says like, all right, I'll take care of your finances now. Give me all your bank accounts and access to it. Right?
No, I mean, look, some managers will do that and it's perfectly fine. But there's a big difference between cost accounting, like management accounting, and actual overarching accounting. And I think it's always best to have an external accountant. In fact, there's a lot of prominent management companies now won't work with you unless you have a really good accountant on the side.
Yeah.
Who usually be your tax accountant, but get a tax accountant who knows the music industry. And it's really weird. I see so many young artists who are like, you know, I'm only earning 600 quid a gig, and like my record sales aren't selling, and it's like, you know, I can't pay for accounting. And I'm like, well, yes, you can, because most accountants will charge you a very limited percentage. And I'm yet to meet an artist who hasn't gone to an accountant and went, actually, they've ended up saving me money.
Yeah.
So like, and they're the last port of call between you and your money and decisions and stuff. And so yeah, like that would be my number one kind of bit of advice is.
I think that's a really amazing advice to all young artists out there and older ones too.
And it's affordable. It's always affordable. You can always find a good music industry accountant, and they can. And some of them, like, I'll tell you one thing that's really, really pertinent is, so like, I'm in the UK, we have this Brexit shit going on.
Yeah.
I'm telling everyone, get an accountant, because you're going to be dealing with foreign taxation forms and like A1 forms for like national insurance and stuff. It's going to be an interesting time. So having someone who can, at least you can pick the phone up. I think sometimes there's a misconception that if you pick your phone up to an accountant, they're going to be sat there with like a timer charging. I've never met an accountant.
Dean, the elephant in the room with respect to management discussions tends to always revolve around, why should a manager get a cut of the DJ fees when it's the agent who over the years, because playing out has become so dominant, and it's become like the primary, revenue source. A lot of agents have also taken on more of a managerial role with the artists that they represent. Why are managers entitled, or why should they be entitled to?
Well, they shouldn't always be. So, if you deal directly with your agent and you kind of have a relationship and they do all of your advancing and stuff like that, then you could, you'd struggle, but you could maybe try and have an argument with your manager and say, oh, well, actually, that's not the money. You won't get very far with it, because the reality is that a good manager should have you in a situation where your career is at a point where you can be getting the gigs in the first place. And I think, as I said earlier on in our conversation, and this is not to.
But how do you know if your manager is not just relying on the agent to do their thing, knowing that with a full diary, because of the agent's efforts, you're going, the manager will make, the money that they're going to make or whatever, and not go the extra mile to elevate the artist's career to warrant, taking a slice of that. Like
transparency.
How does an artist know that?
Transparency and the conversation at the beginning of the agreement, where you literally say, okay, well, what are you going to do? And it's what I was saying to you earlier on with the whole COVID thing and lockdown. It's like, there's a lot of managers who've been like, oh shit, I didn't have the other revenue stream sorted out for my artist. I didn't have a long-term plan. I didn't have a backup plan in case anything went wrong. I didn't have a really strong release plan. All of those things feed into your career. There's no one element of an artist's career which is fully stand on its own. Everything kind of feeds into each other. And if you have a manager you ring them up and they just go, okay, well, yeah, there's just some gigs in the diary, and they're not responsible for like helping you promote your gigs, helping you have a kind of digital presence that makes sense, that they're not responsible for liaising with your agent and having regular conversations about, areas that you want to work in that you're not, and how we're going to get you there, or areas that you're overexposed in. Like a manager should be like a real team player, and they should be not between the artists, but they should certainly be working with the artist and, with PR or anyone else that's working around them. And yeah, you know what? I'm sure there were some artists, some managers out there who had literally just sat back and collecting the money, and but they're pretty obvious when that happens. It's like because all you got to do is ring them up and say, well, what have you been doing? It's like, oh well, actually, one thing that I would always recommend is that a good manager should should be dealing with your agent. They should be the one who's the kind of real main point of contact and be having the conversations, the long conversations that are tedious and annoying before those offers get to you. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to balance that with being fully transparent, but a manager should be the one who's like, you know, when a gig offer comes in and it's totally ludicrous. And don't get me wrong, you have a lot of agents who will reach a certain point, but you also have a lot of agents that don't have like an understanding of kind of what an artist fully wants to achieve. So, you know, the manager should be able to kind of act as a bit of a filter there and have those long conversations before offers get to you. So if the manager's not doing that, then they're not really worth working with.
And Dean, what's your thoughts at the moment on being a manager and obviously working with agents? What's your thoughts on accepting gigs or gig offers in this time or during this, what's happening? I mean, especially with like Ben or Spencer, I mean, are you taking the offers seriously? I mean, what's your thoughts on getting them back on the road?
I obviously, because of client confidentiality, I can't really tell you exactly what I'm doing, but I think at the minute, as a generalized point, right, is that, and I'm going to say this as someone who's a PR as well, and I kind of do a fair bit of crisis management advice, is that there are a lot of risks associated with accepting shows at the minute. Purely because the internet is not one country. So if you put up a video of you playing a show with people that don't have masks on, you could be in a territory where that's perfectly fine. But 99% of the people who will see it won't think that's fine. And then the reputational damage to that can be quite difficult. So I think you have to be, one, careful about what you're accepting, and two, careful about what information you're putting out there. Because, and also there's actually like a little bit of a moral and ethical issue there as well, where, you know, DJs are the kind of new superstars, and, you know, you can set bad examples very quickly. From a management point of view and accepting gigs, I think right now, and I think actually most agencies are doing this. They're having conversations with gigs, particularly with trusted promoters, but they're all sort of holding back on contracting.
Yeah.
Purely because it's unnecessary paperwork, and contracting now could be damaging for either party, because obviously you could accept a show, say in October, and you could agree to do it for, you know, completely different conditions to what you would normally do that show, and then that territory could open up within the next week, and then suddenly everything would be back to normal, but you've accepted conditions that would be really difficult for you. So I think the best bit of advice for sort of managers and artists at the minute is to be incredibly agile and kind of assess everything that comes in, but do so based on the knowledge that, like, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 days, never mind the next 2 months.
So how do you navigate your artists through that minefield? Like, you know, there could be, you know, there's a legitimate gig that's happening, that's allowed to happen legally somewhere. The cases aren't that high. There's capacity limits. The promoters have ensured that all safety protocols have been met or will be met. And they want you to play. They want your artist to play. Your artist, obviously, we all feel, we have conflicting feelings about doing any gigs right now, short of a vaccine. How do you navigate that minefield? Like, you accept to do it. Maybe there's other artists on the lineup. All protocols have been discussed ad nauseum and will be taken care of. Or you can pull out if you feel like they're not holding up to what was agreed upon in advance. But what do you do in that situation? You know, it seems like there's no right answer.
There isn't. There's I think a good manager. I think one of the reasons why, like, I mean, I'm not going to describe myself as a good manager, but I'd like, you know, I think one of the benefits that I've found in my career is that I'm a pessimist and I'm a worrier. So whenever anything like this comes across my plate, I will literally look at every element that could go wrong. And in the current situation, which is unprecedented, let's face it, I will literally sit and look and go, well, look, these are all the mitigating circumstances that could allow this to go ahead. But these are all the bad things that could happen. And that's when you sit down as a partnership and you discuss it between you, and you kind of work out whether that's going to be too much for that artist to deal with, or whether they're in a point in their career where they don't want to deal with it. And you come to that decision together. It's not, you don't make unilateral decisions. You discuss the risks and you work them out from there.
I mean, it seems like the artist would get flack for agreeing to do it. And then if, unfortunately somebody gets sick, hopefully doesn't, but could die as a result or whatever like that, the artist will get blamed.
Yeah.
Right?
The worst case scenarios right now.
That's the worst case scenario. Yeah.
Yeah. The worst case scenarios are pretty grim. So
are those worst case scenarios fair to the artist? If the gig was legally signed off and allowed to happen by the authorities, and people had to assess their own risk in coming into that situation, because to me it seems like, short of a vaccine, that's how it's going to start. I mean, our scene started with illegal parties and people doing all kinds of things that are indescribable at these illegal raves or whatever. And that's how it started. I mean, it's a pretty shady environment. It's shadier now with the virus. That's added a whole new layer of shadiness. But like, what's the right answer?
It's not fair. No, but
it's not fair to the artist, right?
Unfortunately, DJs are at the kind of top of the brand pile. Mm-hmm. So, if an event gets put on, it's like marketed around an A-list DJ or whatever, and they're the ones that are going to get shot down if something bad happens. And it's not fair. But then there's many things in life that aren't fair. So, my job is to explain the fact that.
Do you think that's legitimate? Sorry to cut you off. Do you think the attacks are legitimate and righteous, or are they, spearheaded by people who just want everyone to chase the new shiny ball this week, and they want to create some drama, and they want to create a situation, cancel culture, blah blah blah. Is that the goal of these people, or do these people have legitimate gripes?
I don't think you can lump in a lot of the people who would express concerns under the same banner. Unfortunately, anyone who has a concern now has a mouthpiece because of the internet. So I don't think it's legitimate in all cases, but some may be. I think from an artist point of view, you have to just be aware that those people will be emboldened to criticize. Now, that's not fair, and it's not legitimate in all cases, but sometimes you can end up in a situation where it may be, and that's a problem. And, look, if I was managing an imaginary act, say I took on a new act tomorrow, and an offer came in, and a promoter had said to me, look, all of these precautions are in place. My first thing would be say to the artist, look, these are all of the risks. And there's manageable risk, which is, let's make sure that we have a driver that picks you up and that driver's got a mask on. And that let's make sure that we have had an assurance from the club on the security. The unmanageable risks will be the reaction of the internet, right? Yeah. And also if something happens at the show. And at the minute, the unmanageable risks are really, really tricky to control. And I think, people's kind of feelings towards us are really, really heightened, and for good reason. But there's no hard and fast rule on it. I think, we all have to have very difficult conversations with our managers, with our agents, with our own consciences about whether to accept gigs.
Are we being irresponsible as A-list artist figureheads or whatever in accepting gigs? during this period of time, like, should we just not accept any gigs, or is the situation not going to roll out that way? Like, there's going to be certain territories that aren't as affected, that have been able to manage and mitigate the virus situation, that are able to, keep the economy, because, there's an ecosystem that's affected. There's a massive ecosystem. And we're all right now, we're seeing how interconnected we all are, and how much we rely on one another for that ecosystem to operate effectively. So by saying no, you're kind of, there's people that work at that event that they're looking forward to that. And they're going to make a bit of money to get them through that month or something,
Yeah, and promoters and venues are in probably some of the worst situations, because they have bricks and mortar to deal with.
I wanted to ask, this is what I wanted to ask you, Dean, as well, regarding all of this. I mean, having living in London or the surrounding area, I mean, and I know you love eating out and going to the pub. I mean, how is it now in the UK? I mean, there are social distance parties, right? There people are trying stuff.
So the UK guidelines at the minute are, so the social distance parties means that you can go to a pub and on one table, this is amazingly complicated. So you can't have music which will lead a customer to shout. So it has to be below a certain dB level. Although they haven't actually named the dB level, they have said that you're not allowed to have customers shouting to prevent people from leaning towards each other.
Right. Wow.
They have to be only grouped into tables that involve 6 households. And generally speaking, most of the things that are happening are literally people in courtyards, sat on benches with music playing in the background. There are some sort of illegal parties and stuff that have been going on, but they've been going on throughout. And but yeah, I mean, there's not like parties going on, and I think it'll be a while. I mean, at the minute, the government has said early November, I think, is the next assessment on when anything bigger can sort of happen. Obviously, there is some slight some quirks to the rules. So live venues with seated social distancing can't happen. So maybe we'll end up in a situation where people could play gigs in theatres to people sat far away from each other. But I saw
there was one this week, wasn't there, in Camden, and they said it was a disaster where they tried to do some seated show. It was social distancing. I think the capacity was maybe like not 10th, but it was a small amount of people in a big venue.
I didn't say that, but I mean, there's a couple of really good club promoters in London who've been doing some very small scale. I hesitant to say events because they're not. Right. They're people sat down at tables and music playing in the background, and there's a few of them that have been doing them to relatively good responses and safe responses and stuff. So I think that will provide some revenue streams for now, and also actually revenue streams for DJs. But it's not what anyone's used to.
No.
Do you give any advice to any of your current artists or anything of how else they could get some money coming in that has to do with music? Does it even make sense with music sales and streaming, even though it's a very minuscule part of our income?
The first thing that I told everyone to do was, because also you have to think about recorded music. Usually people go through distributors or other record labels where the accounting will be twice a year, or even if you have your own label, you might be on a deal with the distributor where you earn money quarterly, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I said to not my management roster, but also the PR roster and everyone that we work with was like, focus on Bandcamp, because you can get that money out quickly. And, if you're talking about just covering rent, I mean, we all know that recorded music sales will never equate, even for relatively low earning DJs, will never equate live fees. Mm. But my first thing was right, can you pay rent? Can you pay your mortgage? And let's focus on that. Because once that's done, we can worry about other stuff. So yeah, initially it was Bandcamp. And then it was like exploring whether, we've got some remix ideas. One thing I'll say about good artist managers as well, and good accountants, is that they will say to artists, like, have you got any savings? Because let's face it, I mean, like David, what was it, a year and a bit ago you broke your leg?
Yeah, last year.
You know what I mean? If you didn't have provisions for that, that would have been a big whack.
What happened, David?
Last summer, just almost a little over a year and a month ago, I broke my ankle when I was in a gig in Vietnam.
Wow.
And I had to cancel all my gigs of July in like half of August, basically.
Wow.
So I was just at home with a cast and a broken ankle.
But my point is that again, good managers, good accountants, and savvy artists should always. I mean, let's face it, nobody can have a rainy day fund for a completely unprecedented pandemic. But also living hand to mouth, if you're going to afford not to, is not the wisest idea.
Dean,
wait, sorry, I quickly have to chime in because I'm literally running on battery power here, guys. Yeah, I'm sitting outside on a mountain. For those who wonder what I'm doing here, I'm having 2%, so I'm going to be cutting off at any second. Dean, it's been so nice to hear. I'm going to try and listen to you more now. I'm going to be really back on the show next Thursday. Thanks, guys, for letting me in for my holiday here. And you keep going because I'm going to be gone in like 10-30 seconds.
Right. Have fun, Chris. Talk to you soon.
Have fun, Chris.
Guys, thanks.
Dean, creative management versus traditional management models, like which is more essential? And how much of your scope of work is creative?
It depends what the projects that you've got in front of you. So, there are some times when I'll sit and go, oh, well, this is actually a really good idea. Like, why haven't we thought about doing this? And then, if it's a general idea, you'll maybe just kind of pick one of your acts that makes the most sense. But I mean, for me, I mean, that occasionally happens, but a lot of it is collaborative. So, a lot of it will be like, okay, well, we have a club night for a certain artist. And then, we'll maybe think of some really cool ideas to do around it. And, I'll have input with that. I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I don't think I'm that creative a manager. I'm definitely better at the artists I work with having ideas. Or certainly the artists I work with tend to have more ideas than I do. And then I will try and find ways of making those happen. And they will have kind of creative input at each step of the way. But yeah, I mean, it's really funny actually. A little while ago, Patrice Baumel.
Yeah,
he did a really, really interesting Facebook post, which is I'd urge anyone.
I think I read that. It was amazing.
The difference between the rainmaker manager and the kind of admin manager, and he said sometimes you'll have the rainmakers who open doors and who create new opportunities and who have the creative ideas, and then you have the managers that kind of dot the I's and cross the T's and stuff. And there was huge amounts of debate, and I was kind of like triggered by it, and I was thinking, God, what am I? And then I actually realized, and I was like, actually, you don't want either of those managers. You really want one who's going to do both. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to fuck up. So yeah, like, I don't know, on the kind of the creative side of it, it's definitely, I don't think it's my strongest point. I think I'm much better at kind of going, okay, that's a really good idea. How can we make the most of it? And actually, generally, I find most artists are artists because they tend to have really good ideas. But, I've had a few good ideas in my time. I can't tell you what they are, but there's definitely been some.
Well, this was a fantastic conversation. And I'm sure there's going to be a part 2 and 3 and 4 in the future as we navigate through this. Yeah.
We haven't started on food yet, Dean.
Yeah. And this picture you posted the other day of a pizza that you made looked insane.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're very much into food, and are you doing a lot of cooking or baking?
So, obsessively. So I much like when I got into music, like I'm sure you guys probably all agree. Like when I first got into music, I couldn't just be like a clubber. Like I needed to be involved, like I needed to do it. And then You know, I love food, and you know, I like cooking. About 10 years ago, I realized cooking was like a real escape from music and like day-to-day life. Because when you work in music and music's your passion, there's very little else that gets in the way. So, you know, I'd find coming home from like, you know, work, that cooking would be 1 hour that I'd escape. I mean, you know, you guys know. And but yeah, so like lockdown has been interesting because cooking 3 meals a day for yourself and my girlfriend has become like really like a kind of challenge. But I've kind of counteracted that by initially, I did what everyone did. It's like, all right, I'm going to start baking some bread because I love cooking, but I've never baked. So I was like, right, okay, take that cliche off the list. And then I started out, I'm going to start doing some more advanced stuff. So I started teaching myself how to do lacto fermentation. Yeah. So I've been doing lacto fermented like chili sauces. And then I was like, okay, I bought a pizza oven. So I've been doing like slow fermented pizza doughs. I taught myself how to do rapid infusion. So I've been working on making the ultimate Bloody Mary by doing rapid infused black pepper tinctures.
You got to tell me how to do that. I love Bloody Mary.
Yeah. Mate, do you know what? I'll sort you out with that. I think I might have nailed it. But yeah, like all that sort of stuff. Like, you know, it's what I'm kind of interested in. But this is the thing about being at home all of the time, because we still haven't opened our office yet. Is you know, you kind of need to find things that are going to take up time. So a lot of projects going on.
Yeah, I mean, I find I don't have enough hours in the day to tackle everything that I've always wanted to. Not having the time because you're always on tour. And I've found my moments of zen in baking bread, which is really funny. And I was thinking about it the other day because a friend of mine asked me, like, why are you so obsessed with it? I think it's the process of something having this, it's like a 2-day thing, you know? And then you have your starter that you create, your wild yeast culture that you create, and you have to feed every day. So it's like this living organism in your home. And the whole cycle has this beginning, middle, and end to it. And how you manipulate time and temperature determines the outcome. And you have to pay attention to all those things very carefully. And, you know, the end result could be amazing or it could be a total disappointment, kind of like a DJ set, you know, like an open and closed DJ set. But the beauty of it is if you fuck up, you can do it again and again and again whenever you want. And the entire cycle begins anew every time. And there's something beautiful and magical I find about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely enjoyed doing bread, and I've never, despite the fact that I love cooking, I've never done it before. And then the whole sourdough culture thing. But you know, like everyone's got one, and everyone should have a mate who cuts through the pretension and the bullshit. So I was telling one of my mates about like sourdough cultures and stuff, and he was just like, sounds like a fucking shit Tamagotchi. I was like, all right, okay, that's it. All right, so I'm not interested in that anymore. But yeah, no, it's like stuff like that. It's been really nice to sort of connect with reality a little bit.
Yeah, shout out to
the bread looks really good, by the way, Ali.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was just shooting the shit with Sasha the other day. He's living in Ibiza with his family, and he's fully immersed in all this as well. He's got his sourdough starter, baking all the time.
Wow.
He was always into food as well, but I had no idea he was into baking. You know, it's a great time to pick up new skills.
Yeah. For sure.
But Dean, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. Great to reconnect.
Thanks for having me on.
Don't be a stranger.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you in person.
Yes, likewise, Mo. I've heard so much over you, like over the years, and it's weird that we've never met.
Never had a chance to hang. Let's change it someday in the future.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks, dude.
Stay
I've
safe.
learned a lot of stuff about management and PR that I've always had this kind of thought that I knew of what it was, but really I really don't know. I'm like,
are you more confused or less now?
No, less. I mean, I've kind of had these conversations with Dean already, but never really gone this deep into it. And I feel even then it's still we're like barely at the first level. So
There'll
Yeah.
definitely be a part 2.
Yeah, well, maybe next we should get Spencer Parker on the show and grill Spencer about Dean.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
Stay healthy, stay safe.
Man.
Bye, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Who's on next week?
Yeah.
Who's on next week? Let me check real quick.
Ah, shit, I forgot already too.
Yeah, I know we got Benny Rodriguez.
Oh yeah,
for
that's next week.
We have my good friend Kenny Larkin from Detroit.
Oh, Kenny. Nice. When is Benny?
Benny is August 20th.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
Kenny, right on.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good to see everybody.
Bye.